Welcome to the Part 2 video on Clean and Paint within Tekla Structures going over to Tekla EPM. So in the Part 1 video, I showcased how we can export both the Clean and Paint using the Finish field here within Tekla Structures over into Tekla EPM. Now here I can see that I've got the Finish field, and I can either put the full Clean and Paint spec here, or I can just do an abbreviated, PNT for painted, or galv, for galvanized parts, and then none for no paint. And essentially I can export that and map that over to the Finish field in Tekla EPM. Now, the problem that we faced was that if I did not set anything, kind of like this beam here that's in blue, if I didn't set anything in the Finish field, then nothing would get exported. However, watch this. If I open up that shop drawing, we're going to actually see that there is a Clean and Paint specified on the drawing title blocks. Now, this field here, unfortunately, does not export out to Tekla EPM by default. And so what it is that detailers on the job are coming in here to project properties, they're going down to user-defined attributes, and they're coming in and they're using the project standard paint or finish. And so sometimes they'll just put both the clean and the paint here, and they'll say, hey, this is the default clean and paint for the entire job. And if there's nothing different than this, then this is what's going to show up on the drawing title blocks. But this does not export by default. And in this video, I'm going to show you how to get that over to Tekla EPM. Okay, so to get started, let's actually go to this beam here where I did specify something specifically in the Finish field versus reading something from the actual project properties. So I'm going to open up that shop drawing, and this is the easiest way to quickly get to access to the template or the title block. So watch this. I've got this SP2 standard primer. You'll see that when you click on this, it'll highlight the different templates in that drawing layout. Now I'm just going to go ahead and double click on the title block. And I'm just going to go to template editor, and that will open up the template editor. Now this is just a message here saying that, hey, this was originally created in the old template editor. If you save it, you can't go backwards, no problem. So I'm going to go ahead and do a save as here. And like I've showed in other videos, whenever you modify a out-of-the-box Tekla template, you should always save that into your model. That way you don't mess up anything in the main system installation. So I'm just going to come in here and I'm going to put this in my model folder. I'm going to leave it exactly the same name and just press OK. Now you'll see that, wow, this is a lot of different title blocks that are in here. Well, that's because there are 5 different styles out of the box, and we are using style 5. And if we come down here to paint, here is the value field that controls that. Now if I double click on this, you're going to see here it says GetValue Project User Defined Project Standard Paint. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how if you click on Formula and then open up the rules dialog box here, we can actually type in a formula that's going to check to see if the Finish field is filled in. And if it is, then it's going to output that. And if it's not, then it'll output this Project Standard Paint. Now, for the sake of saving a little bit of time, I'm actually just going to paste in the syntax of the formula that we need here. And before I go through and explain this, I just want to explain that all of these formulas that I'm modifying, they're actually in the description of the video. But if you feel uncomfortable with modifying these templates and dealing with these rules, not a problem. You can reach out to me and hire me to take care of this. I do this all the time, and I can get it set exactly the way that you need it based on your fabricator standards. So if you feel uncomfortable with this, just reach out to me. We can get this taken care of. And if you have multi-drawings where the rules are a little bit more complicated and you kind of have to do things a little bit differently, then again, you can reach out to me, and then we can work together to get you squared away. All right, so to explain what's happening here, essentially we have a conditional statement. So we're starting with this if statement here, and there's a test or a condition. So if the main part of this assembly's finish field is not equal, so that's what the exclamation equal sign means, not equal, double equal would be equals to. But if it's not equal to empty string, that's what the double quotes is with nothing inside of it. So an empty string means that it's just, quotes. All strings have to be wrapped in quotes. It's kind of like a programming thing. So if basically the main part finish is not empty, then, so we have the then statement, then I want to actually output the main part's finish. That's what we're going to show in the title block. Now, if it is equal to empty, so it's not filled in, then it's going to go to the else statement here, and it's going to read the project user-defined project standard paint that we showed at the beginning of the video. Now, whenever you do any of these formulas, whether you're copy pasting or you're trying to use the functions up here and actually build this yourself, sometimes there's going to be syntax errors. You might forget a parentheses or a quote. So you always want to press this check button at the lower right and just see whether or not the formula is correct or not. If you get an error or something's wrong, then you kind of need to go back and double check and make sure you don't have anything incorrect. Now I know exactly what's wrong here. We essentially have that first line up at the top, and that's messing up the syntax. And so I'm going to press check now, and it says the formula is correct, so we're good to go. So I'm just going to press OK. I'm going to press OK here. And now I'm going to save this template, which is, again, inside of my model folder. So remember to save as and put it in your model folder before you change and save anything. All right, so I'm going to save. Then I'm going to go back into the drawing. So when we look at the title block, the problem here is that you'll see that right now by default, before I refresh this, it's reading from the project paint. But if you look at the finish field in the actual bill of material for the main part of the assembly, it's showing something totally different. And so, we could leave this as is, just like I showed in the part 1 video. There's nothing wrong with this other than it's showing a lot of extra stuff here, right? So it's more things for the shop to read and is not necessarily kind of as clean as it can be. So now that we've added that rule, watch this. I'm going to click on the template, and I'm just going to right click, and I'm going to say refresh template. Now, when you see that, it reloads the saved template that we just added that rule to, and now it's showing the actual finish field from the main part of the assembly. Now, the next thing I'm going to do is, again, we could leave this alone. We could show it both here in the bill of material and in the title block, and maybe, especially if you had the bill of material at the upper right-hand corner of the drawing, depending on how you like to do your layouts. Maybe this is a double guarantee and safe thing for the shop to read it in both places. Now, I'm just a little bit old school, so I'm going to show this and set this up that if it's shown here, down in the title block for this assembly drawing, then really I'm assuming the whole assembly is going to be exactly what it's shown in the title block. So I'm going to get rid of the finish field here in the main part of the assembly in the bill of material template. So to do that, I'm just going to double click on the template, and it will open up in the template editor. Again, we're just going to see this message about the older version of the template, and we're okay. Now we have the 5 bill of materials here. On the title block, we use style 5, but on the bill of material, we actually use style 1. And so if we come up here, we're going to see all of these different rows. Well, how do we know which one we need to modify? Well, if you study the bill of material, essentially the hierarchy or the structure is that there's these 5 styles, and then underneath style 1, there's basically an assembly row, right? And so you'll see that as I highlight these different things here, it's going to highlight them visually inside of the template editor. Now, when you actually look underneath each one of these, you see the assembly row, and then there's going to be a main part and then all of the other parts, and you'll see that it actually goes from top to bottom. Now, we're trying to modify this top part or this top row, which is the main part. And essentially, we have a couple of different remarks value fields here. So if we double click on the first one, we can actually see here that this is the end prep info for bevel cut ends, skew versus square cut. And so we don't want to modify that. This other one here, if we double click on it, there is the GetValue finish. And so essentially for the main part row, we don't really want to output the finish at all here because we have it covered in the title block. So we're just going to delete that out. And so I can select it and say delete, and then I'll just press save. And actually, what do I need to do? I almost broke my own rule. I need to do a save as first, and we need to save this. Do not modify the one here in the installation. Save it to your model folder. And again, if you have excess firm folder and excess project directory at your company, you can first save it into your model folder, and then you can kind of tweak it, make sure it works. And then if you want all of your jobs to have this updated, then you can put it into your firm or your project folder. Or if you have model templates, you can put it in there, and then this will share out through model sharing. And you want it directly inside of the main model folder itself. It doesn't go inside the attribute subfolder, it just goes right in the high level. So there we had our title block that we just modified. Now we have the bill of material. I'm just going to keep the same name and say OK, and then we'll save, and we will go ahead and reopen the drawing. Okay, so we're back here inside the drawing. All we need to do is click on the template, right click, and say refresh template. You can also just reopen the drawing, and that will also reload or refresh the templates. And when we do that, we will now see that the main parts finish no longer displays, and only submaterial part finishes will display. So this looks pretty good. Now, the only other thing here is that I may not necessarily want to see the PNT code or the painted code on all the submaterial parts. You'll actually need to coordinate this with the fabricator, but The way I'm going to actually modify this is that for the main part of the assembly, and if nothing has been set on any of the submaterial parts, I'm going to also automatically export the SP6 red oxide to Tekla EPM. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually just go back in the model. I'm going to clear all these PNT codes or finishes off of the submaterial parts and only leave the galvanized there. And then I'm going to modify the Tekla EPM report, and I'll show you how this will all export correctly. Okay, so we're back in the model, and I have my drawing here. I'm going to highlight all the parts on that assembly. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold down Control, and I'm just going to deselect the main part of the assembly and then that galvanized, basically brick support angle. And you'll see here that in the finish for all the other submaterials, there's this PNT code. We're just going to clear that out of the finish, and I'll either press Enter or Modify here at the bottom, and you'll see that these parts turn blue in the model. So essentially what we're saying here is that the main part of the assembly is where we set the overall assembly finish. And then if there's any submaterial parts on that assembly that are no paint or something different than the main assembly itself, then you set those specifically on those submaterial parts in the finish field, like this galvanized. Okay, let's go ahead and double click and reopen the drawing. Since we modified the finish field, which affects numbering, we need to perform a numbering to update that. And then basically we'll go back into the drawing here. We'll take a look, and this looks pretty good. We have the main title block, so the overall assembly clean and paint spec is shown here in the title block, unless noted otherwise. And so that's assuming that the main part and all the other submaterial parts that don't have anything in the remarks are going to pretty much get this SP6 red oxide, except for this one piece here, which is galvanized. Okay, so now the last piece is we actually need to modify the Tekla EPM report so that way everything exports correctly. Let's quickly recap the structure here, or the hierarchy that we want the clean and the paint spec to be output into Tekla EPM. So if we see all of these pieces that are blue in the model, it basically means that we are expecting to use the project level clean and paint or finish field. So if we go again into project properties, we go down to user defined attributes. Essentially, if nothing has been set in the finish field on the parts or the main part in the model, then it's going to be outputting this standard primer and clean spec for the entire project. Now, if we have something different like we have here, or if we have no paint on embeds or anchor bolts, or if we have galvanized assemblies, then essentially the next level in the hierarchy is we're going to check the main part of the assembly to see if there's something different than what's set in the project property level. So if something has been set specifically here, we're going to read this, and this has a higher priority than the project level paint. Now, the last piece is that here we have a submaterial part that is attached to this assembly, and it's galvanized, and it's different than the main part of the assembly. And so that's the highest hierarchy here. So if something is set in the finish field at the submaterial part level, we're going to output that. If not, we're going to next look at the main part of the assembly. If something's filled in there, then we're going to output that for the main part and all the submaterial parts. If nothing is set there, which is like the rest of the job, everything else is blue, then we're going to go to the project properties. All right, let's go ahead and modify the report. Okay, so within the template editor, this was the title block that we modified. All we need to do is come up here to File, Open, and we're going to browse into the installation folder structure here, and we're going to actually go to C, and then I'm going to go to Tekla Structures because that's where I have my environments installed. But you may have your environments installed in C Program Data, which is a hidden folder that you might need to turn on. So I'm going to go into C Tekla Structures because that's where I have my environment installed. I'll go into 2020 because that's the version I'm working in. Environments, I'm working with USA. And then there's these three folders here. Now we're going to go to the Common folder, Steel, and then Reports. So I'm going to go ahead and just show this drop down here, and you can take a look at that. And if you need to, you can pause the video and just take a look at that folder structure there. And so basically, once we're inside there, we're going to scroll down until we find the 450 Tekla EPM Part Report. Now, depending on what version of the EPM plugin you have, like I always download the latest one from the warehouse, and so that's why you see multiple versions here on my computer. But whatever the latest and greatest version is of the report, dependent on whatever version of the EPM plugin you have, that's what you want to open. So again, Tekla EPM Part Report. So I'm going to open that up, and then here we get the old version of the template editor message. And so there's a lot of value fields here. Now, if we actually look at the hierarchy tree view at the left, you'll see that there's a part row. And so basically it's a bunch of selected parts in the model, and it's going to output all the parts, whether it's a main part or a submaterial part, it doesn't matter. It's just going to output a bunch of part data. Now, it does read the assembly GUID that it's on, and so basically this report gets run by the Tekla EPM plugin, and then it turns it into an XML file. So when we're looking at all these different value fields, you'll see that there's profiles included in here, user defined, gauge material, the material grade, length, and here we are looking for the finish field. Now, if we select on it in the tree view, it's going to actually highlight it over here in the actual graphical interface. And it might be a little bit hard to see. So you can either double click on it once you see it over here, or you can just double click on the finish field in the tree view and it will open that up. Now, when we actually look at this, we need to modify this formula. So instead of it just outputting the finish and whether the finish is set or not, we're going to put this hierarchy to look at the project properties. We're going to look at the submaterial finish or the part finish itself, and then we're going to also look at the assembly. And we're going to follow that same hierarchy that we just went through. Okay, and again, for the sake of time, I'm just going to paste in the formula here. And so let's just take a look at this logic. And again, this is in the description. We'll get rid of the just default here. So now we have a little bit of a nested if statement. And so we actually have to come in here and we have to have two endifs, because we have a if the finish is not equal to blank for the part. So like for instance, the galvanized part, then we want to output the finish field. Now else if the finish is empty and it's a submaterial part, then I'm going to go look at the assembly main part finish value. And if that's not empty and that's actually filled in, then we're going to use the assembly main part finish and we're going to output that. So this is the trick, right? So if the fabricator wants every single part, including the main part of the assembly as well as the submaterial parts on the assembly, to have the finish code on them and not just the main part of the assembly, then this is what you do. So if the submaterial parts finish is not filled in and it should inherit the assembly's basically main parts finish, then that's what this rule takes care of. So this is kind of like an else if, it's a nested if statement. And so at the end, if the part finish for the submaterial is empty, the main part finish is also empty, then we will else here and we will just return basically the project user-defined attribute project standard paint. And so we just have two endifs here at the end because we had two if statements that were put together here and nested. And so we're all good. Let's just check the formula. The rule is correct. We'll say OK, press OK here. And I'm just going to go ahead and save the report. And then we will go back into the model and we will run the report and you'll see how this hierarchy works. Okay, so we're back in the model and I'm going to go up to reports and I will scroll down until I find the 450 Tekla EPM part and whatever the version that you're working with. I'm working with version 4. Now I'm going to make sure that all of the parts on this assembly are selected in the model, because that's basically what's happening is that the EPM plugin export is running a parts report here and we're just testing on all the parts on this assembly. So we have all the parts selected. We have the report selected. We'll say create from selected here. And now I'm going to scroll over a little bit to the right and we will see here that there is the SP6 red oxide set on every part in the assembly, except for the one piece here that has galvanized on it. All right, so that looks like the rules in the hierarchy work. If the main part of the assembly is set, then all the other submaterial parts are going to use that unless the submaterial part has a specific finish filled in, and that's exactly what we have here. Now, I'm going to hold down Alt and I'm going to select another assembly in the model and basically just grab a specific piece here or an assembly that does not have the finish field filled in, right? So we can see here in the properties that no finish is set on any of the parts in this, and we can see that it's blue. So I'm expecting this to basically read the SP2 and the paint and the clean that is in the project level properties. So let's run this report here for this specific assembly. We'll scroll over to the right and basically we'll see here that it is outputting the SP2 standard primer that is reading from the project properties. So this is essentially how you customize Tekla and tweak a little bit of the out of the box in order to get all of the clean and paint from the project level properties, from the assembly, or from the submaterial parts in order to get that to come across and map to the finish in Tekla EPM. If you found this content useful, please subscribe to our channel and press the alerts button to be notified when we upload new content.